Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Don, and for the final assignment today, I'll be speaking about brief number one, which is in regards to medical device packaging and agility. We find ourselves reviewing medical device supplier O, who is having a tough time getting products to market due to the lack of agility in their packaging. Today, I'll be proposing a value chain solution which will hopefully address this lack of agility, lack of innovation, and lack of supplier participation within the medical device packaging industry. So there are a few assumptions I'll be making just based on the brief, and I'll also be making some assumptions just based on my experiences as a medical device packaging engineer. So the initiative I'm proposing on this slide can really be summarized. It's to engage the packaging engineering team earlier on in the product development process by instigating what's called the Packaging Voice of Customer initiative. In case you didn't know, Voice of Customer is essentially getting feedback from your end user and incorporate that into your packaging design. So voice of customer and usability in medical device packaging is becoming especially prevalent just because of the updated standards that are rolling out, which are going to start requiring usability testing. So if a company wants to remain compliant, they're going to need to have testing to show that the packaging works in terms of how the customer interacts with it in the field. So how does something like voice of customer or usability involve the topic of managing knowledge? So we have three different types of knowledge management sections that I want to go over, which is human, structured, and social knowledge. With human knowledge, this initiative really has packaging professionals concentrate on the voice of customer and usability in their packaging design. Now, historically, the objective for med device packaging was to just make sure the package system is sterile by the time it reaches the customer. And that still is the case nowadays. But by emphasizing voice of customer and usability in your packaging design, you're now further enhancing the industry knowledge in the area. With structured knowledge, this is how a company basically operates. Medical device companies are very structured. There's a lot of documentation as well. But with packaging, sometimes it seems that packaging engineering is involved later on in the design process, which can cause issues for companies trying to get to market faster than they can, and that's partly due to not realizing that there are pretty much the same requirements in qualifying active implantable products with qualifying packaging parts. Now, you wouldn't think that a carton change would require, like a 6-month submission, but sometimes that does happen. But by initiating voice of customer studies in the beginning of your product development cycle, you're engaging the packaging engineering team early on so they can, make better decisions or react more appropriately instead of, get this done ASAP. Lastly is the social knowledge aspect. Now, if company O emphasizes the value of packaging voice of customer, this increases the knowledge within the company itself, basically on the importance of packaging. Since packaging isn't a technically difficult or complicated concept to grasp, everyone's somewhat involved with packaging. It makes learning, or it makes teaching also easier. So the concept that you could express is, you could have the best stent on the market, like medical stent. But if someone in the hospital doesn't like how your box opens up, they're not going to use it, and that's a missed opportunity right there. So shared value. If a company's O spearheads the usability and voice of customer initiative, they're really addressing all the social issues that have extended to the end user via the packaging. So voice of customer primarily being utilizing feedback from the end user. Company O can, once they engage this end user, they can take design considerations into account to maybe fix some of the difficulties that packaging has. The measurable value here is how well the packaging design performs in the real world from a user and preference standpoint. I wanted to show this example right here. I believe this won the 2015 Ameristar Award, but this is a thermoformed tray that it's one tray that can house 16 different catheters. Now, on the picture on the right, it was a redesign of the tray on the right. So you can see it's a smaller volume tray. And you'll notice that on the left picture, you see this knurling that's on the surface. This contrast of, I guess, this visual contrast serves two purposes, one for the customer and one for the company. For the customer, they're able to visually see pretty easily where the product is in the tray, because some of these can get pretty complicated. For the manufacturer or the medical device company, it allows ETO or ethylene oxide gas to pass through the channels a lot easier. So next is inspires from above and inspires confidence. So we're all aware of the sustainability initiatives being driven by these large companies like Apple or IKEA. However, other than Amazon, I personally have not been able to find any medical device company that's publicly expressing, their aspiration for creating packaging by incorporating feedback from the field. So by incorporating voice of customer and usability, Company O can publicly address the need for speaking with customers and their end users, not only for new product requests, but for new packaging design to address different social needs. This, in turn may hopefully inspire other companies and maybe other suppliers, not only in the medical field, but in other goods, commodities or industries as well. I guess to give a good idea of how this can be inspiring, we had an employee at my company actually who had to go to the ER after some blister packaging had cut her wrist. And, I don't mean to really capitalize on her misfortune, but if that were to be made public, companies who were publicly advocating voice of customer and packaging usability, they would be in a pretty advantageous position against others, just because you're designing for customer use and not for customer getting injured. So reward significance in relationships. Now, in most cases, medical device packaging is relatively low volume. There have been instances where my annual volumes would be produced in a matter of less than an hour at some of these manufacturers. So it's incredibly low compared to some other industries. Company O, unfortunately, has partnered up with a supplier who is not exactly prioritizing their needs just because they're such a small fish in the world. Really, normally I would suggest that Company O try to find a smaller and maybe a more local supplier to enhance the regional cluster and build relationships. But I'm going to talk about how voice of customer can be incorporated instead. So in the previous slide, I mentioned how voice of customer really can be used to publicize that your company's, thinking about the customer, because that publicity actually creates value for both the company and its supplier. So if you're awarding suppliers, via press or award ceremonies on the innovations of user-friendly packaging design, this puts the supplier in a very positive spotlight. And by continuing to do so, you're recognizing the efforts of your supplier company, and it will attract other companies to go to that same supplier because they practice voice of customer or usable designs. Additionally, voice of customer engages the actual user base. So there could be more bias towards one brand versus the other because of the personal involvement. So if, let's say, you made contributions to Apple's packaging and you had a choice between Apple and Samsung in front of you, you would most likely go with Apple products. So in the past few slides, I talked about how voice of customer can be integrated into the new product development process, how knowledge can be transferred, throughout the company or throughout the industry. Um, sorry, how knowledge, or I guess how voice of customer creates shared value, and how you can maintain positive relationships through practicing voice of customer and usability. So all these points I've talked about, they all feed into the medical device cluster throughout really all these sites here. This is a picture of medical device clusters by employment. It's 2004, so it is old, but due to the companies competing with each other on the hospital shelves, it's become purely a matter of preference between the packaging in some cases. Um, by further innovating the packaging, you're moving the whole advancement for packaging innovation forward because all these companies are trying to get a one up on each other. So it's like after visiting some hospital catheter labs, like it's really interesting just what some companies are doing. Not to name names, but I've seen packaging that lights up, or packaging that has easy corner pull tabs, or ones that feature like a pretty ergonomically friendly closure strip. So all these companies are trying to, get an edge over each other, specifically through packaging innovation, and it's all super interesting. I can't wait to see what else we have in store, and I'm actually happy to be a part of it. Lastly, these are my references here, and that concludes this presentation. Thank you. How do I close this?